Welcome back for another Ukraine Explainer video. Today is Sunday, February 27th, and in this video I'm going to cover three developments that have happened sort of overnight or today in European time. The first is an announcement by the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, and the German Bundestag that they're planning to dramatically increase German defense spending and really reinvest in NATO. The second is an announcement, we think at least, a plan for negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to try to end the conflict. And then the third is an announcement by Vladimir Putin that he's putting Russian nuclear forces on alert, which is quite ominous. So first, Germany increasing its defense spending. This is really a dramatic change in German policy, really a decades-long policy of both in the late Soviet era and in the post-Soviet era of really trying to focusing on getting along with Russia rather than deterring Russia or preparing for war with Russia. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine seems to have really changed the mind of sort of collectively of the German elite. And it's worth noting that this German government is a social democratic government, which means it's the force in German politics which traditionally has favored having very good relations with Russia and trying not to antagonize Russia. So the big picture here is Russia got into this saying that it was upset about NATO. And as a lot of people predicted, it seems to have produced exactly what it didn't want, which is a resurgent NATO. Germany has said it will now spend more than 2% of its GDP on defense, which is something that the United States has been trying to get Germany to do for decades. And so in this sort of ironic sort of way, Putin has managed to get Germany to do something that a whole string of U.S. presidents was unable to do. So the second thing, so that's very important in the long term. In the short term, what's incredibly important is that there's potentially negotiations going to happen. There was a little bit of back and forth as to where these negotiations would happen because the Ukrainians quite reasonably were worried that it was kind of a trap, that Zelensky or somebody would go up there and then they'd be able to easily decapitate the Ukrainian government. They seem to have reached an agreement to have negotiations on the Belarusian border. The question is, what will this lead to? Does this really amount to anything? And we don't know. This could easily, of course, be a ploy on the part of the Russians just to try to distract the world or to seem more reasonable, or maybe to try to take a little bit of the steam out of the Russian defense, out of the Ukrainian defense. That being said, every war, or almost every war, ends with a negotiated solution. So at some time, negotiations are going to have to happen. A really interesting question is, what kinds of things might the two sides put on the table? One can imagine that Russia will feel that, given the fact that it controls a very significant chunk of Ukrainian territory at this point, that it'll expect Ukraine to make all the concessions. I would expect that Ukraine, given the fact that it seems to be holding up better than most expected, might basically say to Russia, basically, you just need to get out. So I'm not particularly optimistic at this point that we'll get to a negotiated solution, but hopefully it's a good sign that at least Russia is beginning to realize that this was not such a hot idea, and maybe the Russians are beginning to look for a way out. And then the third big development, the very ominous one, is this announcement by Putin that he's putting Russian nuclear forces on alert. This is, I think, not only ominous, I actually am going to call it irresponsible. It's irresponsible because there's a whole chain of things that needs to take place before you can launch nuclear weapons, and some of them can be done very quickly. There's always been fear, since really the dawn of the nuclear age, of accidental nuclear war. And while I'm sure Putin is being very calculating in what he's doing, the closer you get to actually launching the nuclear war, the easier it is for things to happen that nobody anticipated, or for accidents, which is a reason why we don't have these things on high alert at all times. So somebody asked me yesterday, is there any chance of this leading to World War III? And I said, no, I don't think so. And I still think that, but a little bit less confident than I was yesterday. So why did Putin do this? I think there's two reasons potentially why he did it. One is, as the West has ramped up sanctions, right, announced significant new sanctions yesterday, including at least partly cutting off Russia from the SWIFT system of bank transfers, which really is a major economic sanction that a lot of people thought was sort of the nuclear option. And a lot of countries are now saying they're going to supply weaponry to Ukraine, including Germany. real weaponry, the anti-tank weapons, anti-aircraft weapons. It may be that what Russia is essentially is trying to deter the West and others from providing more support to Ukraine. I think the other thing, though, is this may well be calculated to go along with this potential negotiation, which is to say, maybe give people in the West a little bit more fear of where this might lead, and a little bit more incentive to pressure the Ukrainians to come to a deal that Putin feels like is a deal that he likes. So those are three big developments today. We still, of course, don't really know where things are going. But for the time being, the Ukrainian army is holding up. The Russian army still has a lot more forces to bring to bear. So it's early days, but clearly this is not going as Putin expected. And that itself is to be expected. War almost never goes as we anticipate.